Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into the world of applied behavior analysis.
ABA?
ABA. And we're going to be using this book
Behavior Analysis for Lasting Change.
to kind of help us break down all these complex concepts. And we even have some tables in here
Yes.
that I feel like are cheat codes for understanding this whole field.
Absolutely.
So think of this as your shortcut to really getting ABA.
I love that. A shortcut to really getting ABA.
So to kick things off, what exactly is applied behavior analysis?
So ABA, in a nutshell, is really a science
Okay.
dedicated to understanding and changing behavior.
Okay, so not just understanding, but changing.
Not just understanding,
Uh-huh.
but changing. And importantly, it's about socially significant behavior.
Okay, so stuff that really matters.
Yes, exactly. Things that are going to make a difference in people's lives.
So how is that different than just observing people?
Well, ABA, it doesn't just describe behavior, it helps us improve it.
So it's like taking action.
Taking action.
Okay.
It's based on this idea that behavior is learned
Okay.
and it's influenced by the environment.
So it's not all just nature.
Well, nature and nurture, they both play a role, but ABA is really focused on that nurture piece.
That nurture.
How the environment shapes what we do.
Gotcha. Okay, so the book actually mentions that ABA is based on some pretty hardcore philosophical ideas.
Yes.
Like determinism.
Yes, determinism.
That word honestly always sounds a bit intimidating to me.
I know, it's a big word.
It is a big word.
But it's a really simple concept.
Okay.
And basically, determinism just means that behavior doesn't happen out of the blue.
Okay.
There are reasons for it.
Reasons.
And ABA, what it does is it looks at those reasons, the environmental factors that influence behavior,
Okay.
and it uses that understanding to figure out how to create change.
So kind of like detective work almost.
Exactly like detective work.
Okay.
You're searching for clues to solve the mystery of why this behavior is happening.
Gotcha. So it's like a cause and effect kind of.
Cause and effect, yeah. Environment influences behavior.
Now, the book also goes into the history of ABA, and it turns out it's got a pretty cool backstory.
It does, yeah. It's more interesting than you might think.
Yeah.
So ABA, it actually kind of emerged out of experimental psychology way back in the 1940s.
Wow, okay.
And it really started to take off in the 60s.
Oh, wow, okay.
And you had these pioneers like B.F. Skinner,
Yeah.
who were all about really rigorously observing and measuring behavior.
Systematic.
Super systematically.
Yeah.
And what they found was that behavior, it wasn't just random.
Okay.
It could be reliably changed by tweaking the environment.
So changing the input.
Changing the input, changing the environment.
Yeah.
You change the output, the behavior.
So that's a pretty powerful idea.
It is a powerful idea.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what sets ABA apart, right? It's not just about talking about behavior. It's about actively doing something to change it.
So let's say you're an ABA profession, and you're working with someone who is struggling with a particular behavior.
Yes.
How do you approach that? What's the process look like?
It's a very systematic, step-by-step approach.
Okay.
And it all starts with really carefully observing and measuring the behavior that you're trying to change.
So you're not just jumping in with solutions.
No jumping in. Got to understand what's happening first.
You're gathering data.
We're scientists, right?
Yeah.
You need evidence.
Okay.
And then once you have a good handle on that behavior, what's going on, what are the factors that are influencing it, then you start designing interventions that are really tailored to that individual.
And that's where those evidence-based strategies come into play.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we want to use things that research has shown
Okay.
to be effective for changing behavior.
So we're not just pulling stuff out of a hat.
No magic tricks here.
Okay.
We're going with stuff that we know works.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I thought was so interesting from reading the book is just how broad ABA is.
It is, yeah.
It's not just for kids with autism.
Right, definitely not.
What are some other areas where this is used?
Oh, all kinds of areas. So you see it in schools, you see it in workplaces, you see it in homes, you see it in hospitals, really any setting where you're trying to change behavior.
So lots of different settings.
Lots of different settings.
The book has this table, actually. I think it was table 1.3, and it lists all these different areas where ABA is making a difference, and it's pretty mind-blowing.
It is, and the coolest thing is that the core principles, they're the same.
Okay.
No matter what the setting is or what specific behavior you're working on.
So it's that underlying framework.
It's a framework, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say someone is thinking hey, this ABA stuff sounds really interesting. Maybe I want to become an ABA professional.
Awesome.
What would you tell them?
I would say go for it. It's a great field.
Okay.
It's really rewarding if you're passionate about helping others.
Yeah.
And you're curious about behavior.
Yeah.
It could be a really good fit.
So to do that, you need some specialized training, right?
Yeah, so you do need specialized training and certification.
Okay.
And there are different levels. So you can become a registered behavior technician.
Okay.
That's an RBT.
RBT.
All the way up to a doctoral level board certified behavior analyst doctorate, which is a mouthful.
It is.
So we call it a BCBAD.
BCBAD.
But yeah, there's a clear path
There's a
for
pattern.
people to get involved, to get qualified.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Now I want to touch on something that might be a little controversial.
Okay.
This idea of the radical behaviorist perspective.
Right, right.
And it seems like ABA takes a pretty strong stance on this, right?
Yeah, so ABA is really grounded in this idea that all behavior, even our thoughts and feelings, are shaped by the environment.
Even thoughts and feelings.
Even thoughts and feelings.
Okay.
Which might sound a little radical to some people.
It does sound a little radical.
But when you really think about it, it just emphasizes how important our environment is in shaping who we are.
So our inner world, our thoughts and emotions are like influenced by external factors.
They are, and that's really key to how ABA approaches changing behavior.
So you're not trying to analyze like someone's deepest thoughts.
No.
You're really focused on the external.
On the external, what we can see, what we can measure.
And you're trying to influence that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
practical.
Makes sense.
And we can actually do something about it.
So given the power of these techniques, ethical considerations must be super important.
They are incredibly important.
Yeah.
I mean, you can imagine how these techniques could be misused.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's critical that ABA is used ethically and responsibly.
So you're not trying to control people or force them to change?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It's really about empowering people to live better lives.
Okay, so that's a really important distinction to make.
It is.
All right, so we've laid the groundwork, right? Like we talked about the history, the principles.
The philosophy, the ethics.
All that good stuff. But now I want to see this in action.
Let's get into it.
Let's see how this actually plays out in the real world.
Let's get practical.
The book mentions all these different applications, like, teaching kids to read, workplace safety. I mean, it's pretty mind-blowing how diverse this field is.
It's super diverse. One of the coolest things about ABA is how adaptable it is.
So can you walk me through, like, how an ABA program is actually designed?
Yeah.
And, like, put into practice?
Absolutely. Let's start with an example.
Okay, love examples.
So imagine a workplace
Okay.
where they're having a lot of injuries because people aren't following safety protocols.
Okay, yeah, that's a problem.
So an ABA pro would come in, and the first thing they wouldn't do is like just assume they know the problem.
Okay.
They would actually figure out the exact behavior that needs to change.
So, like, very specific.
Super specific, yeah.
Okay.
So let's say in this case, it's like people aren't wearing safety goggles.
Okay, when they're supposed to.
When they're not getting machinery.
Got it.
That's step one, to find the behavior.
Pinpoint it.
Pinpoint it, exactly.
Okay.
Then you collect data.
Oh.
Which could be observing employees, looking at accident reports, even like doing surveys. The whole point is to figure out what's contributing to this problem.
So you're like investigating.
Your detective ABA is all about data.
Data-driven.
Yes.
Okay.
And once you have a good understanding of like, okay, this is the problem, these are the factors, then you design your intervention.
And that's where the expertise comes in.
That's where the fun begins.
Okay.
So what could that look like in this workplace example? Well, you could start by giving employees better training.
Okay, so more information.
Yeah, on why safety goggles are important. Maybe show them like some scary pictures of what could happen if they don't wear them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and then really highlight the benefits. Like, hey, if you wear these, you get to keep your eyesight.
So it's about education.
Education's a big piece.
Okay.
But sometimes that's not enough, right? Sometimes you need a little extra motivation.
Okay, I'm with.
So that's where positive reinforcement comes in.
Okay, so how would you use that in this situation?
You could publicly acknowledge employees who are consistently wearing their goggles.
Okay.
Like in the company newsletter, at team meetings.
Like Employee of the Month.
Yeah, something like that. You're just celebrating those good behaviors.
Instead of just punishing the bad.
Yeah, I mean, you might have some consequences for not complying.
Okay.
But the focus should always be on the positive.
Positive.
Yeah, catch them doing something, right?
Okay, so you've implemented all these interventions. What happens next? Do you just like cross your fingers and hope for the best?
No way. You got to keep track of things.
Okay.
That's the next step. Monitoring. Yeah, you're collecting data on how often people are wearing those goggles, tracking any accidents, basically making sure it's working.
So it's an ongoing process.
It is. You're always checking, making adjustments if needed.
So it's not just like set it and forget it.
Nope. ABA is all about flexibility and responding to what the data tells you.
I love this workplace example.
Yeah.
It's really helpful. But how about other settings like schools?
Schools, yeah, totally different, but the same principles apply.
Okay.
So let's say you have a kiddo who's struggling with reading. An ABA pro might use something called discrete trial training.
Discrete trial.
So basically, you're breaking down this complex skill of reading into like tiny little steps.
Okay, so it's less overwhelming for the kid.
Exactly. You're not just throwing a whole book at them.
Yeah.
You're teaching them one letter, one sound at a time.
Got it.
And then you can use all sorts of cool tools like flashcards,
Okay.
visual aids, anything to help them learn.
So it's all about tailoring it to the kid's needs.
That's the heart of ABA.
And of course, positive reinforcement.
Oh, yeah, can't forget that.
Right, like stickers and rewards.
Stickers, prizes, high fives, anything that motivates them.
So it seems like positive reinforcement is like a core principle,
It's fundamental.
no matter what you're applying it to.
It really is.
Now, before we wrap up this section, I do want to circle back to ethics,
Always important.
because we've talked about some pretty powerful techniques.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about like working with kids, especially when there are challenging behaviors.
That's a critical area where ethics is paramount.
So what comes to mind for you?
Well, let's say you have the child who's having these really intense tantrums.
Okay.
An ethical ABA professional would never use like punishment or anything that could hurt the child.
Right, because that goes against everything ABA stands for.
Exactly.
Right.
You're not trying to cause harm, you're trying to help.
Right.
So instead of punishment, you might teach the child other ways to communicate their needs.
Okay.
Maybe sign language, picture cards, even just like a calm down corner where they can regulate their emotions.
So it's about giving them tools
Tools and strategy.
to cope in a healthy way.
Yeah, you got to figure out why they're having those tantrums, what's the function of that behavior, and then teach them a better way.
And that kind of brings up the question of free will, right?
Yeah.
Because some people might worry that ABA is about like controlling people.
Yeah, I get that, but honestly, that's not what it's about at all.
Okay.
ABA is about empowering people, giving them choices, helping them live their best lives.
So it's not about limiting choices, it's about expanding them.
Exactly, giving them more options, more ways to interact with the world.
Okay, so we've seen all these examples of how effective ABA can be,
It's pretty powerful stuff.
but I imagine there are also limitations, right?
Of course, no approach is perfect.
Okay.
And I think one of the biggest challenges with ABA is to avoid getting so caught up in the data that you lose sight of the person.
Okay, yeah, so it's finding that balance
Finding the balance, yeah.
between the science and like the human element.
Because we're working with people, not just data points.
Exactly.
Another thing to be mindful of is culture.
Culture.
Yeah, you got to make sure your interventions are sensitive and appropriate.
Okay,
Not everyone's the same.
one size fits all.
Yeah, one size fits all doesn't work here.
Gotcha. So tailoring it is really important.
That's essential.
I think what's coming through for me is that being an ABA professional is not easy.
It's not for the faint of heart.
Right, you need that scientific knowledge,
You need the skills,
but you also need compassion.
empathy, a real desire to make a difference.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, but it's so rewarding.
Well, we've covered so much ground in this part of our deep dive.
We've seen it in workplaces, schools, talked about some tough ethical dilemmas,
It's been pretty intense.
but there's still more to come.
There's more in our final part.
Yeah, we're going to look ahead to the future.
What's the future look like?
Oh, the future's exciting. ABA is always evolving, right? Like always adapting to new challenges.
I mean, just reading the book, I was struck by how much technology is changing things.
Oh, yeah,
Like all these apps and software programs for ABA intervention.
totally. Technology is like a game changer.
Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing apps that help people track their progress,
Okay.
practice skills, even get feedback like in real time.
So it's making it more accessible.
Way more accessible, engaging, and you can really personalize it.
Yeah, because not everyone can like afford a therapist or
Exactly.
get to an office or like.
It's breaking down those barriers.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like imagine a kid who's autistic and has trouble with social stuff, right? Now there are apps that can like simulate social situations.
Oh, wow.
So they can practice those skills in a safe space.
That's amazing. But I mean, with all this progress, there must be some controversy too, right?
Oh, there's always debate, especially in a field like this.
Where the stakes are so high.
Yeah, you got to be careful. Ethical considerations are huge.
So what are some of the hot topics right now?
Well, one big one is the use of aversive procedures.
Aversive procedure?
Yeah, basically it's using like unpleasant stuff to try to reduce problem behaviors.
Okay.
But there's a big push to move away from that. It's
Definitely.
about being effective, but also compassionate.
So, like, what are some alternatives?
Well, we're seeing more focus on positive reinforcement, skill building, teaching people how to communicate better.
So it's more about, like, empowering them.
Exactly, giving them the tools they need to manage their own behavior.
That makes sense. Now, another question I had is about subjective experiences,
Okay.
like thoughts and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Because ABA traditionally focuses on observable behavior,
Yeah, what you can see.
but are people starting to consider those inner experiences more?
Yeah, that's a growing area of interest, definitely, because thoughts and feelings, they matter too, right?
Totally.
They influence behavior.
Yeah.
So some practitioners are saying, hey, we need to take a more holistic view.
So it's not just about the external anymore.
It's about the whole person understanding their internal world.
Makes sense. It seems like ABA is always trying to be better.
Always evolving, and another big part of that is cultural sensitivity.
Oh, right, because not everyone comes from the same background.
Exactly. Different cultures have different norms, beliefs. So ABA has to be adaptable to that.
So it's about making sure these interventions are appropriate.
For everyone, regardless of their culture.
I mean, this has been such an eye-opening journey.
It's a fascinating field.
It really is.
I mean, we've barely scratched the surface.
I know. It's so much to learn.
But hopefully you have a better sense of what ABA is all about now.
Yeah, I feel like I've leveled up my understanding.
That's what we like to hear.
And if anyone wants to go even deeper,
oh, yeah.
there are so many resources out there.
Books, articles, courses, you learn it.
And the cool thing is ABA is everywhere, right?
It's all around us. Schools, workplaces, homes.
So keep an eye out for it.
You might be surprised where you see it in action.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
Me too. And to everyone listening, remember, the power of ABA is all about creating positive change.
Helping people reach their full potential.
Exactly. So let's all keep learning and keep believing in that power.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll see you next time for another exciting adventure.